Disclaimer: this video is intended for mature audiences and is made for educational and documentary purposes. The entries discussed in this iceberg are meant to be thoroughly analyzed with the viewer's intuition and personal judgment. Viewer discretion is advised. And now we're moving down the iceberg into Tier 4, with our first entry on Tier 4 being CM Punk breaks straight edge for one night. One of the most iconic figures in wrestling, CM Punk built his entire persona around being straight edge. No alcohol, no drugs, no shortcuts. That unwavering conviction was the foundation of his character and his real-life identity, until one night it wasn't. In a 2017 episode of Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, the former WWE writer revealed a momentary crack in Punk's hardened armor. It happened during a Harley race birthday celebration in Kansas City, one of those rare moments where legends gather and everything's casual. Everyone took shots except CM Punk. His strict ethos meant no drinking, no smoking, no messing around, except when Harley Race asked him to take a shot and CM Punk obliged. CM Punk later explained to Bruce Pritchard that one shot isn't going to kill him, and he took a shot out of respect for Harley Race. That tiny breach, out of camaraderie, not rebellion, made headlines among fans. For CM Punk, it wasn't about weakness, it was about humanity, but for others, it's a crack in the straight edge armor. And up next we have Lita sold her body. Lita, one of the most iconic figures in WWE women's history, started her journey in Mexico under the tutelage of luchadors like Al Dandy. But backstage rumors and internet forums claim Lita allegedly exchanged lewd favors with Al Dandy and maybe others just to earn her place in wrestling. Of course, there's no confirmation and no credible source, but still, the whispers live on, feeding the mythology around her controversial rise. And up next we have Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels, secret gay lovers. It's no secret that Vince McMahon gave Shawn Michaels special treatment, especially in the 90s when Shawn was at his most volatile. Despite constant problems backstage, Vince kept on giving him chance after chance. Some people chalk this up to Shawn being one of the biggest stars and top draws in WWE at the time, but conspiracy theorists believe there was something more going on. According to these conspiracy theorists, Shawn Michaels allegedly hooked up with Vince McMahon behind the scenes in exchange for preferential treatment. There are also plenty of rumors surrounding Shawn's sexuality, partly due to his flamboyant behavior and his nearly nude photoshoot for Playboy, a magazine marketed to both women and gay men. Even in the WWE locker room, some wrestlers believed Shawn and Vince had something romantic going on, especially since Shawn was constantly seen entering Vince's office and staying in there for unusually long periods of time. Even Bret Hart himself once alluded to the idea that there might have been something more than business between them.
I mean, I don't know, because you never know what goes on behind closed doors, but I really strongly think there's a link between some kind of a homosexual tie-in between Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon. What do you say?
And up next we have Owen Hart's signed over the edge ticket. This one might be one of the most chilling pieces of wrestling memorabilia in existence. A fan shared a 1999 over the edge ticket, signed by Owen Hart just hours before he tragically fell to his death at that very show in Kemper Arena. The ticket is for the exact event where he passed away, making it potentially the last thing Owen Hart ever signed. And while Owen's autograph was common due to his generosity with fans, this one hits different. It's not just a signature, it's a timestamp, a final imprint, the kind of artifact that gives you goosebumps when you realize what happened later that night. And up next we have Dustin Rhodes is the father of Cody Rhodes' conspiracy theory. Cody and Dustin Rhodes are one of the most well-known brother duos in wrestling, achieving major success as both a team and as rivals, but according to a strange conspiracy theory, they might not be brothers at all. The rumor goes that back when Dustin was about 15 or 16 years old, he got a girl pregnant, and because teenage pregnancy carried a heavy social stigma in the 1980s, his father Dusty and stepmother allegedly raised the baby, Cody, as their own child to protect Dustin's future. This kind of cover-up wasn't unheard of back then, and it's led some to believe that Cody is actually Dustin's son. Whether it's true or not, it's one of those eerie what-ifs in wrestling that makes you question everything you thought you knew about wrestling royalty. And up next we have Vince McMahon paid off the Florida government. In April 2020, during the height of the pandemic lockdowns, WWE was the only sports entertainment company in the country that continued running live shows under a statewide stay-at-home order. How? Florida Governor Ron DeSantis bizarrely classified WWE as an essential service, allowing Raw, SmackDown, and NXT to air live from the Orlando Performance Center. Officially, DeSantis said Floridians were starved for content, but conspiracy theorists smell something far darker. On the same day WWE got the exemption, a pro-Trump super PAC run by Linda McMahon, WWE chairman Vince McMahon's wife, pledged $18.5 million to politics in Florida. 3 days later, Vince McMahon was appointed to a Trump Economic Advisory Board. All of this also conveniently paved the way for mass layoffs and cuts within WWE, yet live tapings rolled on. Coincidence or calculated power play? The optics are sinister, leaving many convinced that WWE pulled off a clandestine influence operation. And up next we have the Umaga SA. Shelly Martinez revealed that while she was employed by WWE back in 2006, she was SA'd by another wrestler. The wrestler in question was the late Umaga. According to Martinez, the two were friends, but Umaga apparently wanted more out of the friendship. She was dating another wrestler at the time and claimed that she wasn't interested in Umaga that way. One night, members of the roster got together to party and Shelly had a bit too much to drink. She says that while she sat on the couch, Umaga allegedly climbed on top of her and started to touch her chest and privates. Shelly claimed that all she remembers was praying that she wouldn't get R-worded and she was able to somehow push Umaga off of her. The next day, Shelly went to her friend Melina and told her about the incident, and some male wrestlers overheard her. Shelly claims that those wrestlers were friends with Umaga. They shouted at Melina to smarten her up, and then Shelly then claimed that she became enraged and ran up to the unnamed wrestlers in question and yelled in their face. And up next we have the Iron Sheik almost purposefully breaks Hulk Hogan's legs. Long before WrestleMania became the juggernaut it is today, Hulk Hogan's rise was being fought for behind the scenes, and according to one of wrestling's darkest rumors, someone didn't just want to stop Hogan's push, they allegedly tried to cripple it permanently. Back in the early 1980s, Hogan was on fire in the AWA. The fans loved him and the money was there, but Vern Gagne, the traditionalist running the show, refused to put the belt on Hogan. Gagne didn't like his style, and he didn't believe that he deserved to carry the company, so Hogan jumped ship. He then went to WWF, and Vince McMahon made him the face of the brand. WrestleMania was on the horizon, and Hogan was about to change wrestling forever. But all of this rubbed Gagne the wrong way. So much so that according to multiple sources, including the Iron Sheik himself, Vern Gagne offered the Iron Sheik $100,000 to break Hulk Hogan's leg during their match at Madison Square Garden before WrestleMania 1, to make sure to squash Hulkamania. The Iron Sheik declined and the match went on as planned and Hogan's career exploded. And up next we have the Chris Benoit Foreshadowings. In an eerie coincidence, in WWE's SmackDown vs. Raw 2007, a cutscene in the game featured The Undertaker cutting a promo that seemed to foreshadow Chris Benoit's fate. What makes this unsettling is that the game was released before Benoit's death, and the promo's wording now feels strangely prophetic in hindsight.
If you insist on making this mistake, then your grieving family will have no one to blame but you when the inevitable occurs.
But that's not the only foreshadowing of the Chris Benoit tragedy. In what is now considered one of the most unsettling promos of his career, Chris Benoit once stood backstage, his face covered in blood, his expression cold and intense. Looking straight into the camera, he delivered a line that, in retrospect, feels deeply disturbing. He said this: "My wife and children will not be watching Raw because I am going to do something that is unthinkable. I will leave you with my anger. Sleep well." At the time, the promo was meant to be just another intense, rage-filled moment from one of wrestling's most serious competitors, but after the horrific events of 2007, these words took on a far deeper meaning. Hearing those words now, knowing what was to come, sends chills down the spine. Was this just a scripted promo, or an eerie glimpse into the anger and torment that was already consuming Benoit's mind? And up next we have Kelly fooling around backstage. In a June 2011 radio interview, WWE star Randy Orton accused former WWE diva Kelly of being an extremely promiscuous woman in the locker room. Orton said that he could name at least 10 wrestlers she fooled around with during her WWE tenure. Two names that he mentioned were Edge and Dolph Ziggler, but from past knowledge she also had relationships with Justin Gabriel and Test. Kelly also briefly dated actor Jimmy Pevin, who she met while he was a guest of Monday Night Raw. And up next we have Vince McMahon's unheard trauma. Beneath the iconic Vince McMahon persona lies a little boy shaped by violence and secrecy. When Vince McMahon was a child, his stepfather, Leo Lupton, physically assaulted Vince very often, and one time Vince even claimed that he almost died after a beating. This put a lot of anger in the little boy, and Vince even lamented that his stepfather died before he could kill him with a pipe wrench. But that's not the whole story. In a rare, painful disclosure during a Playboy interview, Vince McMahon revealed that the abuse wasn't just physical. He was also SA'd, not by his stepfather, but by someone in his family. He described it as a weird experience too horrible to fully explain. What lingered was trauma, an unwavering desire for control. Vince built an empire from that hurt, masking vulnerability with domination. This is not to garner sympathy for the devil, but psychologists say that such childhood horror often ossifies into a relentless will to power. And up next we have Bruno Sammartino wrestles an orangutan. Before he became the longest reigning WWE champion in history, Bruno Sammartino stepped into one of the strangest and most disturbing matches in wrestling history, against a real orangutan. In 1956, long before the bright lights of Madison Square Garden, Bruno found himself at a carnival in Pittsburgh. Promoters offered him $25 if he could last 5 minutes in a cage with the orangutan, but the condition was that he couldn't strike the orangutan, just wrestle it. But the match wasn't a show, it was survival. According to Bruno, the orangutan was incredibly strong, and eventually he finally snapped and punched the animal in the gut. The handlers immediately disqualified him and refused to pay him the money. It sounds like legend, but Bruno himself told the story. Whether it was an exploitation stunt or something much darker, it remains one of the most bizarre and unsettling moments in pro wrestling's twisted past. And up next we have Goldust almost gets breast implants. During the height of the Attitude Era, Goldust was already one of the most bizarre and controversial characters in wrestling, but behind the scenes, he was allegedly willing to take it even further, way further. In an attempt to fully commit to his androgynous, boundary-pushing persona, Goldust reportedly approached WWE management with a shocking idea. He wanted breast implants, not as a costume gimmick, actual surgical breast implants. According to several sources, including Goldust himself, he was so dedicated to the character that he believed going through with the procedure would help him get even more heat from the crowd and solidify his place as one of the most provocative figures in wrestling history. Vince McMahon reportedly turned down the idea, possibly out of fear of backlash from sponsors or simply thinking it had gone too far. But the fact that Dustin even considered permanently altering his body for a gimmick just shows how committed or unhinged he was during that era. And up next we have the Big Show Moonsault lost media. Paul White, also known as the Giant or the Big Show, was a professional wrestler who competed primarily within WCW and WWE. He's famous for his large stature, and he's even won 7 world championships throughout his career. During his early years in professional wrestling, he was able to perform athletic wrestling moves like missile dropkicks from the top rope and kip-ups. Additionally, there is footage out there of the Big Show performing a moonsault. When the Big Show was on Talk is Jericho, he discussed how he performed the moonsault during a house show tour of Japan. This resulted in him receiving harsh responses from wrestlers, including Hulk Hogan, who strongly discouraged him from using such moves. The Giant would ultimately use a moveset much more appropriate for his size, following feedback from other wrestlers, and he nixed the moonsault from his arsenal. Many people are said to have seen the footage of Big Show doing a moonsault in his early days, and the Big Show himself confirmed in 2022 that there is a VHS recording of him doing the moonsault, but it remains to be seen if it will ever get revealed. And up next we have JTG taken advantage of in England. JTG is a former WWE wrestler, most known for being one half of the tag team Crime Time with Shad Gaspard. But in his memoir, Damn, Why Did I Write This Book?, he revealed something shocking that happened to him in England. One night after a show, he was at a hotel bar with the boys when he noticed a woman in a red top eyeing him hard. So hard in fact, that even the locker room leader, who he refused to name, picked up on it. Despite that, JTG decided to sneak out early and head back to his hotel room to sleep. Not long after, his phone rang, and it was the locker room leader. He told JTG that he'd sent the woman up to his room and to not disappoint him. Moments later, she knocked on the door, jokingly calling herself room service. Still tipsy and half asleep, JTG opened the door. She walked in, skipped the small talk, and immediately began initiating things. According to JTG, what followed wasn't exactly consensual. He said that he was too tired and too drunk to resist. After everything, the woman then left with a smile, thanking him for a good time, while JTG lay there, feeling, in his own words, victimized. While the story is told with humor, It's a dark and complex situation that sparked mixed reactions from readers. Whether you see it as an outrageous tour tale or something more troubling, it's one of the more disturbing stories hidden in wrestling memoirs. And up next, we have the Green Kane Mandela effect. There's a strange memory shared by many wrestling fans, a memory of Kane, the big red machine, stepping into the ring wearing green. This wasn't just any green, it was a full green bodysuit, matching his alliance with D-Generation X. Some recall it vividly, the mask, the gear, the moment. Others even claim to have seen photos, or they swear it aired on TV. But here's the thing, it never ever happened. In 2022, on an episode of WWE's The Bump, Kane himself addressed the rumor by saying, "There's no green gear. There was never going to be any green gear, and there will never be green gear." So why do so many fans remember it differently? Some say it's a case of misremembered fan art or digital edits, but others believe it's an example of the Mandela effect. And up next we have the Jake the Snake and Hulk Hogan Snake Pit segment. There's an infamous segment that hasn't been seen since the 1980s, but it's become legendary. Hulk Hogan and Jake the Snake Roberts were originally set to feud over the WWF Championship, and to kick things off, Jake invited Hogan to his talk segment, The Snake Pit, for an interview. During the segment, Roberts compared Hogan's arms to pythons and then suddenly dropped him with a DDT, setting the stage for their feud. But things didn't go as planned. The crowd exploded, not for Hogan, but for Roberts. Vince McMahon, who was watching closely, panicked, seeing the fans cheer the heel instead of his top babyface and champion. McMahon reportedly pulled the plug on the feud immediately. As a result, WWE shelved the segment, and the footage has never officially been released. While Hogan and Roberts would go on to wrestle several times in '86 and '87, that original Snake Pit segment has never resurfaced. And up next we have Chris Benoit and his former tag team partner die on the same day. Biff Wellington was a Canadian professional wrestler who, like Chris Benoit, trained in the legendary Hart family dungeon and competed in Stampede Wrestling. Wellington and Benoit even teamed up early in their careers, forming a duo that gained recognition in Japan and Canada. What makes Biff Wellington's story so eerie is the timing of his death. He passed away on June 24, 2007. The exact same day that Benoit took his own life after murdering Nancy and Daniel Benoit. The cause of Wellington's death was later ruled to be a heart attack, brought on by years of wrestling injuries and potential substance abuse. However, the fact that two former tag team partners, who trained together at the same legendary wrestling school, died exactly on the same day in entirely different circumstances has led to much speculation and wild conspiracy theories. Some speculate that Wellington's death was more than a coincidence, that perhaps he knew something about Benoit, or that their shared past somehow connected them in death. Of course, there is no actual evidence linking their deaths, but the strange timing has made it one of the many unsettling coincidences tied to the Chris Benoit case. And up next we have Vince McMahon makes Stratus bark like a dog. One of the most uncomfortable in-ring segments in WWE history saw Trish Stratus calling Vince McMahon to the ring after he humiliated her the previous week by having Stephanie cover her in dirty mop water. After Vince comes out, Trish surprises everyone by actually apologizing to him and begging to make everything up to him. Vince is skeptical and wants Trish to prove just how sorry she is. At this point, he orders her to get on her hands and knees like a dog before insisting she bark into the microphone. Vince then tells Trish that he's seen her on all fours before, and that if she's really sorry, she'll take off her clothes. Trish then strips down to her underwear, and Vince orders her to remove her bra too, but just as she's about to drop it, he stops her. In a move that somehow makes Vince McMahon simultaneously a face and a heel, he spares Trish further humiliation by telling her the fans have seen enough. He covers her with a jacket, and Trish says he has no idea how far she'd degrade herself for the right cause. Vince then sends her back to the locker room. The whole 10-minute segment makes most fans' skin crawl, and it remains one of the most embarrassing reminders of Vince's ego run amok. And up next we have the Hells Angels crash WrestleMania 1. WrestleMania 1 was a gamble, but the show sold out at Madison Square Garden, but there was a very unsuspected twist. According to Backstage sources, the Hells Angels, one of the most notorious biker gangs in the US, showed up the night of the event. The problem, the show was already sold out. Did that stop them? Not at all. The gang allegedly bypassed both MSG and WWF security, sneaking in through a loading bay entrance and somehow making it to ringside. Rather than risk chaos or confrontation, WWE officials brought out extra chairs and let them stay. The logic was simple. Don't poke the bear, especially when the bear rolls 30 deep wearing leather and patches, and probably having some sort of weapons with them too. WrestleMania survived, and so did everyone working security that night. And up next we have Undertaker burned by his own Pyro. During the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view on February 21, 2010, The Undertaker's entrance went horribly wrong. As he walked through his usual ring of fire, a pyrotechnic malfunction caused the flames to erupt directly in his path. His chest and neck were scorched, leaving him with first and second degree burns, but in true Deadman fashion, he pushed through, competed in the Elimination Chamber match and stayed in character the entire time. Backstage, he was seen pouring water over his burns, with his skin literally bubbling. Later on the Broken Skull sessions with Stone Cold Steve Austin, he recalled how the flesh on his chest felt like it was on fire. What made it worse was that he had previously warned the pyrotechnic crew about the flame placement, but his warnings were ignored. The technician responsible was reportedly fired immediately after the incident. Undertaker may be known as the Deadman, but that night he walked through hell for real. And up next we have Perry Saturn shoots on Mike Bell. Perry Saturn was a former bouncer and army ranger, and he was not a man to mess with. During what should have been a routine win over Mike Bell during a WWE Jack taping in 2001, Perry Saturn saw red and began leathering his opponent. Despite what some think, it was not a simple act of malice on Saturn's part. Early on, Bell attempted a hip toss on Perry, and the former European champion took an awkward bump on his head and neck. As Saturn explained later, he was knocked a little silly from the spill and instinctively went into attack mode, getting to his feet and peppering Bell, a veteran WWE enhancement talent, with real shots before throwing him hard out of the ring. He explained after the fact that it was to create some separation so that he could get his bearings and calm down. Unfortunately, Bell took a very hard bump onto his head and neck that could have ended up very badly. Thankfully though, he was okay in the end. The rest of this match went as planned, but when an apologetic Saturn got backstage, he was told in no uncertain terms that things like that were not to happen ever again. And up next we have Ashley Massaro and the escort agency rumor. Before WWE's PG era cleaned things up, the Divas division was more about eye candy than athleticism, and Ashley Massaro was the poster girl for that era. After winning the 2005 Diva Search, Ashley became a staple of mid-2000s WWE, posing for Playboy and appearing in everything from bra and panties matches to risque storylines. But after she left the company in 2008, darker rumors started to swirl. According to multiple internet whispers, Ashley was allegedly linked to an escort agency called Bella Models. The agency, which many believe was a front for high-end fornication selling, was said to offer services including celebrities and models, with reports claiming that Ashley Massaro's price was $25,000. While nothing was ever confirmed, the rumors spread fast. Whether there's truth to it or not, the Ashley Massaro escort theory remains one of the grimiest pieces of WWE lore. And up next we have the Jim Cornette banana tape. Jim Cornette is a prominent figure in the world of professional wrestling. In 1995, he was working with WWE and had some problems in his personal life as his wife wanted a divorce. The problem with his wife eventually went to a court, and part of the evidence that Cornette's wife had was a video of a dominatrix shoving a banana into the orifice on the backside of Jim Cornette. Yes, you heard that right. It was later revealed that when Vince McMahon found out about this, he found it hilarious and made sure to rib Cornette relentlessly for it. At this time, Cornette was working in the creative team in WWE, and Vince McMahon allegedly ribbed Cornette by having a bunch of bananas around for every creative meeting for a while. Even Kevin Nash referenced this when he said that the only match that Jim Cornette would do with him is a banana on a pole match. Even other wrestlers like Chris Jericho and Sean Waltman have also referenced the banana tape during interviews. Perhaps the most famous reference to the banana tape was during an episode of Raw in 1997, when Triple H and Shawn Michaels were doing commentary at ringside, and they were eating bananas live on air, allegedly as a rib to Jim Cornette backstage, who was working in creative. And now we're moving down the iceberg into Tier 3, with our first entry on Tier 3 being Chavo Guerrero involved in Chris Benoit's death. While most accounts of the Benoit tragedy place Chavo Guerrero as a concerned friend and a recipient of Chris Benoit's last messages, Irvin Muchnick's book, Chris and Nancy, raises unsettling questions about Chavo's exact role in the timeline of events. One of the most controversial points Muchnick brings up is Chavo's connection to Matthew Greenberg, the mysterious Wikipedia editor who somehow updated Benoit's page with news of Nancy's death 14 hours before the police discovered the bodies. Irvin Muchnick wasn't convinced of Matthew Greenberg's innocence. What made things even stranger was that Greenberg had previously edited Chavo Guerrero's Wikipedia page. This raised a question. Did Chavo Guerrero know Greenberg personally, or was this just a coincidence? And if they were connected, did Chavo tip off Greenberg about what was happening before the authorities even arrived? Muchnick also dissects Chavo's retelling of events, pointing out inconsistencies in his timeline of when he received Benoit's final text messages. In different accounts, Chavo gave conflicting times for when he read the messages, leading Muchnick to speculate that he may have known more than he let on. And also, why would Chris send Chavo a text message of his address if Chavo already knew where he lived, considering that Chavo was at Chris's house the previous weekend? Of course, there's no hard evidence that Chavo had any involvement to the tragedy, but the strange link between him and Greenberg, and the unclear timing of the messages, remain one of the most bizarre loose ends in the Benoit case. And up next we have the Bella Twins' deviant allegations. WWE Hall of Famer Tony Atlas was on YouTube's You Shoot series and once alleged that the Bella Twins were known for performing certain acts with wrestlers. Tony Atlas claimed that the Bella Twins would relieve themselves on others when asked to do so. Just thinking about this is pretty disturbing. The Bella Twins have never responded to this, and perhaps it's for the best, if it's true or even if it's not. And up next we have Owen Hart's final game. Owen Hart fell to his death in May of 1999. Just 1 month later, the video game WWF Attitude was released, and it would unknowingly become Owen's final appearance in a WWE game. The developers included a brief tribute screen in his memory, and his controversial Blue Blazer gimmick was removed out of respect. But because of the fallout of Owen Hart's death and the long-standing legal and emotional tension between WWE and Owen's widow, Martha Hart, he has never appeared in another WWE game. However, in a surprising move years later, Owen Hart was honored with a full appearance in AEW's Fight Forever, keeping his legacy alive for a new generation of fans, just not under the WWE banner. And up next we have the crazy Vince McMahon and Stephanie McMahon angle. Throughout his career, Vince McMahon has shown that he's willing to do just about anything in the name of what's best for business, and sometimes what he proposed was truly disturbing. In the 2006 McMahon DVD, it was revealed that when Stephanie became pregnant with Triple H's baby, Vince pitched the idea of a storyline surrounding the mystery of the child's father, with the big twist being that Vince himself was the father. Naturally, Stephanie shut it down immediately, but Vince didn't stop there. He offered a compromise, suggesting that instead, her brother, Shane McMahon, be revealed as the father in the storyline. Once again, Stephanie refused. Still, the fact that these ideas were even proposed just shows how unhinged Vince McMahon can truly be. And up next we have WrestleMania 24's Pyro injures fans. WrestleMania 24 was meant to end in glory. The Undertaker had just won the World Heavyweight Championship and fireworks filled the sky. The crowd was electric, and then it turned dangerous. A cable snapped, and instead of sending sparks into the air, they shot sideways into the crowd. Dozens of fans in the upper deck were suddenly pelted by exploding pyros, smoke, and fire. Some described it as raining sparks, with one man's shirt literally catching on fire. Another fan had blood pouring down his head from a falling object, and in total, 45 people were injured, and at least 3 people had to be hospitalized. WWE quickly played down the incident with a brief statement and a few apologies, but no real coverage. It wasn't even acknowledged ever again. Just silence. This incident remains one of the most underreported tragedies in WrestleMania history, and could have actually been way worse than what it was. And up next we have Val Venus's SU. Val Venus was a former adult film star character who found solid mid-card success in the late 90s and early 2000s, but by 2007, his character had fallen by the wayside. To revive him, WWE launched a short series called Sex University, or SU, on their broadband service. It debuted in 2007 and quickly became the most viewed series on the site, racking up over 800,000 views. Only 4 episodes were released, and in each one, Val Venus shared his vast bedroom experience. The show debuted just months before the Chris Benoit tragedy, and after that incident, WWE made a major push toward cleaning their image and shifting more to a PG product. As a result, SU was quietly cancelled. No screenshots or clips from the show exist online, and while it's likely WWE still has the footage archived, it's extremely unlikely that it will ever be released. And up next we have AJ Styles, a flat earther. AJ Styles is widely considered one of the best in-ring performers of his generation, but there's a strange conspiracy tied to his name that's circulated for years. According to various interviews and locker room talk, AJ Styles allegedly believes in the flat earth theory. The rumors first picked up steam after a former WWE commentator, Sam Roberts, hinted that AJ had brought up flat earth ideas during backstage conversations. And in 2017, Daniel Bryan pressed him about it directly, and he dodged the question in a way that only fueled speculation further. This led many fans to believe that he wasn't just being diplomatic, but that he may be actually holding those beliefs privately. WWE, of course, has never acknowledged the rumor, and AJ himself has never confirmed it outright, but in the world of wrestling conspiracies, it's become one of the weirder cult beliefs associated with a top star. And up next we have Bob Holly shoots on Rene Dupree. Bob Hardcore Holly had a reputation within the wrestling industry for sometimes taking liberties with people in the ring, especially rookies, and was considered by many to be sort of a bully. He famously put the boots to eventual Tough Enough Season 2 winner Matt Cappotelli, and there were numerous stories of him working extra stiff with young talent such as Randy Orton, who was booked against Holly on numerous house shows when he was promoted to the main roster in 2002. While such incidents were in a working context, his attack on Rene Dupree during a match on a November 21, 2004 house show in Syracuse, New York was premeditated and very real. On the show, Holly and Charlie Haas were challenging Dupree and Kenzo Suzuki for the WWE Tag Team titles in a hardcore match. According to reports and Holly's own autobiography, Holly started hitting Rene with stiff shots, followed by a vicious chair shot to the head, after which Dupree fled the scene, only to be hunted down by Holly backstage, where the beating continued before it was broken up. Now, for context, Holly claims that he had warned Dupree beforehand about what was coming. As for the reason for the beatdown, Dupree had previously gotten a speeding ticket while driving a rental car registered in Holly's name. Dupree failed to either pay it or inform Holly about it, leading to some legal headaches for Bob Holly. Holly was reprimanded and fined after the incident, though showed no remorse for his actions. And up next we have Michael Hayes calls Mark Henry the N-word. In 2008, former WWE writer and producer Michael Hayes was suspended by the company after allegedly using a racial slur. The incident occurred during Wrestlemania weekend, where Hayes reportedly told fellow superstar Mark Henry, who is black, that he was more of an N-word than he was. The comment was said to be made while Hayes was intoxicated. Mark Henry filed a formal complaint, and WWE responded by suspending Hayes indefinitely. This wasn't Hayes' first brush with controversy though, because over the years, he had been known for making inappropriate remarks backstage. But this time, the situation reached the public, and WWE had no choice but to take action. Hayes was later reinstated after going sensitivity training, but the incident left a stain on his legacy and exposed the racial tension that sometimes simmers behind the curtain in WWE. And up next we have Donald Trump actually bought Raw, conspiracy theory. In 2009, WWE shocked fans with a storyline where Donald Trump purchased Monday Night Raw from Vince McMahon. On screen, Trump immediately promised sweeping changes, no commercials, ticket refunds, and a complete shift in control. While it was pitched as just another WWE stunt, the fallout said otherwise. The day after the announcement, WWE's stock dropped by 7%. Investors panicked. Within a week, Vince McMahon came back on television and bought Raw back from Trump, claiming the whole deal had gone too far. But this abrupt reversal, combined with the real-world financial implications, led to something darker. Some conspiracy theorists believe that the sale wasn't entirely scripted. The theory suggests that Trump may have quietly invested in Raw, or even WWE itself, in a short-term financial move. The public storyline may have just been a cover, and when WWE's stock plummeted, Trump didn't want to own WWE anymore, and Vince McMahon bought it back in order to prevent further damage. The official line is that it was just entertainment, but the timing, the stock market reaction, and the sudden retraction have fueled rumors for years that Trump may have briefly, very quietly, owned a piece of WWE. And up next we have Dave Taylor outside the Chris Benoit residence. Of all the strange and unexplored details surrounding the Benoit tragedy, one of the most peculiar is the reported sighting of former WWE wrestler Dave Taylor outside the Benoit residence just after police arrived. After authorities reached the home, Benoit's neighbor Holly was sent inside first. Inside, she discovered the bodies, and in shock, she fled the house. And in her report to the police, as she ran outside, she saw something even stranger. She saw Dave Taylor and his wife, Lisa, walking toward the house carrying a platter of deli food. Taylor's appearance at the scene raised questions that have never been fully answered. Benoit had missed events that weekend, and WWE had been told his family was sick. Perhaps Taylor had somehow found out and was simply checking in, bringing food to a friend, but others believe his presence was not a coincidence. Conspiracy theorists have proposed a more cynical theory, that Taylor may have been sent by WWE to gather early intel before the news went public. And other conspiracy theorists have theorized that Dave Taylor was in fact involved in the murder in some way. Was Dave Taylor's visit an eerie coincidence, or was there more to it? No evidence ever linked him to anything beyond a well-intended visit, yet his unexpected presence that day remains one of the many lingering mysteries in the Benoit case. And up next we have the SmackDown Here Comes the Pain Panties Glitch. The bra and panties match was a controversial feature in WWE games during the early 2000s, reflecting the attitude of that era. The objective, strip your opponent down to the underwear to win. But in SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, things took a strange and unexpected turn. If you assigned The Rock's signature move, the People's Elbow, to a female wrestler, a bizarre glitch would occur. Instead of removing an elbow pad, the characters would strip off part of their clothing, exposing more than intended. Some believe this was an oversight in animation coding. Others think that it was an intentional Easter egg for male players during a time when the series leaned heavily into pleasing the male audience. Whether it was a mistake or a deliberate addition, it's a relic of a wild era in wrestling video game history. And up next we have Ric Flair and the train photo incident. In 2016, a photo began circulating online that sent wrestling fans into a frenzy. The image showed a man, who looked strikingly similar to Ric Flair, allegedly performing oral on a woman aboard a train. The internet exploded with speculation, jokes, and accusations. Many believed that it was the Nature Boy himself, caught in the act, citing the man's similar hairstyle, build, and infamous wild past. But Flair quickly responded, denying that it was him in the photo. Despite the denial, many fans weren't convinced, given Ric Flair's decades-long reputation for partying, womanizing, and public excess. The image only added fuel to his legend, or to his downfall, depending on who you ask. And up next we have the Big Show death. On December 10, 2016, the internet exploded with reports that WWE legend, The Big Show, real name Paul White II, had gotten into a car crash and died. A short, poorly written blog post claimed that he had been rushed to the hospital and later passed away. It wasn't long before fans began sharing the post, mourning the death of one of wrestling's most iconic giants. The rumor spread so fast that WWE's own spokesperson, Chris Belletti, had to step in and clarify that the Big Show was alive and well. He also confirmed that the blog spreading the hoax had zero affiliation with WWE. Just a day later, the Big Show posted a photo of himself in the gym, and WWE's official Twitter reposted it to shut down the rumors once and for all. And up next we have the Orlando Jordan allegations. Orlando Jordan's wrestling career has always been surrounded by controversy, and not just because he was bi or because of his flamboyant in-ring character. Back in 2006, around the time of his WWE release, rumors began to swirl that Jordan had been bringing a 16-year-old boy with him to live events. The story gained traction online, but was never officially addressed by WWE. The controversy didn't stop there. In 2010, during Jordan's time in TNA, apparently Jordan was bringing his boyfriend into the locker room, and reports say that Ric Flair publicly confronted Jordan's boyfriend at a bar in front of multiple wrestlers, allegedly because Flair believed the boyfriend had acted inappropriately in front of a high-level executive's wife. Flair also made it clear that he didn't think Jordan's partner belonged anywhere near the locker room. But the darkest allegation came years later, when Australian wrestler Carl Inferi accused Orlando Jordan of making inappropriate advances toward underage backyard wrestlers. Inferi claimed that Jordan invited the young boys to the zoo, to dinner, and even to the movies, and said that he had screenshots to back it all up. The full truth behind these stories remains murky, but Jordan's name continues to appear in online forums and conspiracy lists, leaving fans unsettled about what may have truly gone on behind the scenes. And up next we have Amy Weber bullied by Randy Orton and Edge. Amy Weber's departure from WWE wasn't just a career move, it was a result of deep emotional distress caused by bullying from top stars. It all began when she suffered a tailbone injury. Nothing too serious, she could still walk, but the pain was sharp. A WWE trainer told her to grab some pain pills and ice from the men's locker room, and she obliged, but that moment would spiral into something sinister. Not long after, on a flight back to Alaska, Weber was stretched across 3 seats trying to sleep, when Randy Orton slammed into her chair like a linebacker, knocking her to the floor. He then looked at her coldly and said, "You're gonna learn, bitch." Confused and shaken, she tried to ignore it and went back to sleep, until she was suddenly woken again, this time by someone pouring a drink in her face. She looked up and saw Edge standing over her with a cup in hand. When she confronted him, he denied it, smirking. The humiliation didn't end there though, because both Edge and Orton continued to bully her for days afterwards. Weber eventually snapped. She bought her own ticket, left the tour, and quit WWE without saying goodbye. A story is rarely talked about, but it's a dark reminder of how toxic backstage culture can drive someone away from an entire industry. And up next we have the 1995 Anaheim Incident. Just 3 days after SummerSlam 1995, a dark cloud loomed over the WWF when a woman from Anaheim, California, came forward with disturbing allegations. She claimed that on the night of December 29, 1994, after a house show in Anaheim, she was SA'd and physically assaulted by WWF performers. The names she brought forward included Jimmy Del Rey and Tatanka. According to her, they had both been at the bar that night and were involved in the events that left her emotionally shattered. Vince McMahon, still sensitive from recent scandals, swiftly suspended Tatanka for 6 months, while Del Rey, meanwhile, was let go from the company. Kevin Nash would later defend Tatanka, saying that he was merely at the wrong place at the wrong time, placing the blame solely on Del Rey. And up next we have Man Threatens to Kaboom WWE. In 2010, WWE made headlines for a reason no one expected, not because of a storyline or pay-per-view, but because of a kaboom threat. A 22-year-old wrestling fan named Xavier Pagambari was arrested after calling WWE headquarters over 20 times, allegedly threatening to kaboom the entire building and pay them a visit with deathly weapons. Now you might be wondering what sparked this rage. Well, it was the release of Mickie James. According to the reports, Pagambari was so enraged by WWE firing her that he began doing all of this. He was arrested and arraigned on multiple charges, including harassment and multiple counts of threatening behavior. The judge ordered that he have no further contact with WWE, its employees, or go to any of their future events. His lawyer insisted that he never planned to act on the threats, that he was simply a fervent wrestling fan. But the incident became one of the eeriest fan-related moments in WWE history, highlighting just how blurred the line can become between entertainment and obsession. And up next we have the real reason for Dave Lagana's WWE firing. Dave Lagana was once considered one of WWE's rising creative minds. As a writer, he worked closely on SmackDown and ECW, playing a key role in shaping storylines in the early 2000s. But in early 2008, Lagana was suddenly and quietly let go by the company, with little explanation given. The official word was creative differences, but rumors quickly circulated that something more serious had gone down behind the scenes, and the actual reason Dave Lagana was fired was because he approached wrestler Kevin Thorne in the bathroom of a WWE event and offered a lewd proposition of oral. Thorne then went to The Undertaker and complained, who then went to Vince and Lagana was fired. Lagana was a well-known pervert, and it's been alleged he hit on developmental talent that were male and female, but this was the final straw. And up next we have the Vince McMahon and the Genovese crime family connection. One of the most persistent underworld conspiracy theories in wrestling history suggests that Vince McMahon may have had quiet ties to the Genovese crime family, one of the most powerful mafia families in the United States. The theory claims that during the 80s and early 90s, when WWF was expanding into a bigger empire, Vince allegedly received protection and financial backing from organized crime to fend off rival territories. The speculation mainly stems from the whispers around New York's wrestling scene, where the Genovese family held significant sway. Some believe that the WWF's rapid dominance and certain business protections were too smooth to be coincidence. A few even point to the shady venues, quiet backstage, payouts, and Vince's seemingly untouchable presence during scandals as evidence of mob insurance. Nothing has ever been proven. There are no public investigations tying Vince McMahon directly to organized crime, but to some, it's precisely the lack of paper trail that makes the theory more believable, that Vince McMahon had friends who knew how to keep things buried. And up next we have Sable sues for SA. In 1999, WWE star Sable filed a $110 million SA lawsuit against the company. According to the court documents, Sable accused WWE management of asking her to go topless in an evening gown match. When she refused, she said that Vince McMahon called her a prima donna. Sable also claimed that male wrestlers would routinely walk into the women's locker room by accident. She said that some of those male wrestlers would cut holes in the walls to gawk at the women dressing or taking a shower. Wrestlers would also play pranks by stealing her belongings and hiding them or throwing her stuff in the toilet. The case was ultimately settled out of court, however. And up next we have Moms Against WWE. This strange entry comes from a Twitter account that sent shockwaves throughout the wrestling community. Moms Against WWE was a group claiming to fight the moral decay allegedly caused by WWE programming, warning parents about the satanic influence of professional wrestling. The account gained traction after an over-the-top accusation went viral that Daniel Bryan had sent Kane to hell by slamming him through a flaming table at Extreme Rules, and that WWE was trying to portray Bryan as a Christ-like figure while casting Kane as Satan. This account claimed that such imagery was corrupting children and promoting Satanism, triggering outrage from religious groups and confusion among fans. What made the whole thing eerie was that multiple wrestling news sites and blogs ran the story. Whether this account was real or parody, the account tapped into something very real: wrestling's long history of religious controversy and public moral panic. And up next we have Vince McMahon almost bought Newcastle United. One of the most bizarre rumors in wrestling lore involves Vince McMahon and the English football club Newcastle United. Reports first surfaced around 2011 and again in 2014, suggesting that McMahon was sniffing around the club, potentially eyeing it as part of expanding his sports empire. Much like how AEW's Tony Khan's family owns London-based football club Fulham FC, Vince McMahon was allegedly planning to do the same thing. According to multiple reputable sources like Bleacher Report and Sports Illustrated, Vince McMahon saw England as an untapped market for his wrestling empire and was allegedly considering hosting WWE events in Newcastle's St. James Park. In the end though, no deal happened, but the rumor endures in the darker corners of wrestling lore as a what-if scenario. And now we're moving down the iceberg into Tier 2, with our first entry on Tier 2 being Bob Holly could have saved Chris Benoit's life. On the morning of June 22, 2007, Chris Benoit called his longtime friend Bob Holly, asking him to come over to his house. Holly, who was in Atlanta rehabbing an injury, declined the invitation, suggesting that Benoit spend his time with Nancy and Daniel instead. Just hours later, Nancy Benoit was dead. Bob Holly reflected on the call, wondering if things would have been different if he had accepted the invitation.
I talked to Chris that day. At 11:30, left the doctor's office and he called me because I was supposed to go see him, and I didn't go. And he called me and he asked me, he said, "Why didn't you come over?" I'm like, "Well, I knew you just got home, and I figured you want to spend some time with Nancy, blah, blah, blah." No, I was waiting for you to call me. We were going to go get something to eat and blah, 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 all that. And it's like, okay, well, next time I'll come over, Chris. And right. Maybe they wouldn't have gotten a fight that day, or, if I'd have went there and hung out with them, and, I don't know, and it bothered me for a little while that, I should have went and saw him, because then maybe it wouldn't have happened.
And up next we have WWE Girls Gone Wild, live from Spring Break. In March of 2003, while still trying to recover from the Attitude Era's end, WWE teamed up with the infamous adult franchise Girls Gone Wild for an experimental crossover pay-per-view titled Girls Gone Wild, live from Spring Break. Hosted by Jonathan Coachman and Stacy Keibler, the event featured bikini contests, body challenges, and heavy branding from WWE. This pay-per-view was just the start of a broader, ambitious but creepy media push. It was marketed heavily on Raw and SmackDown, including segments teasing Tori Wilson and Playboy. The whole pay-per-view cost $20 and was a mess, as it featured a drunken Snoop Dogg, bikini contests, and scant wrestling with no divas and matches. WWE broadcast it as a pay-per-view, but it was a painful flop and has since been scrubbed from WWE history. Today, Girls Gone Wild, live from Spring Break, lives as a bizarre, buried relic of wrestling's raunchy past, a commercialized collision of adult exploitation and sports entertainment that WWE would never publicly acknowledge again. And up next, we have the WrestleMania arcade endings. The 1995 arcade-style WWF WrestleMania game featured bizarre, sometimes disturbing secret endings for each superstar. It played like mini cutscenes after championship victories. Most are surreal, as Doink the Clown brings a circus to the ring only to have an elephant go berserk and trample the audience, Bret Hart becomes a spaghetti western kingpin in Italy, Lex Luger transforms into a patriotic icon, Yokozuna somehow destroys America's moral fiber through sumo dominance, and Shawn Michaels is swallowed by a horde of adoring women before entering politics. But the darkest ending is Razor Ramon's. After winning the title, he becomes a motivational speaker in Cuba, only to get violently mugged, stripped of his belt, descend into alcoholism and homelessness, sleeping on train benches, then vanish for years until being discovered running a pawn shop in Chile. This one is especially unsettling because even though all of these things didn't happen, Scott Hall in real life did spiral into alcoholism. All of these endings show how a cartoonish wrestling video game hid deeply unsettling narratives, turning arcade victories into existential horror. And up next we have Asuka's nasty gear. Before joining WWE, Asuka, then wrestling under the ring name Kana, was known for her bold, sometimes shocking produced shows on the Japanese indie scene. One moment that's drawn intense scrutiny online is when she wore gear in which she appeared to wear attire strongly resembling the SS uniform. This wasn't just an ambiguous symbol, as she had the whole military getup, reminiscent of World War II era imagery. While some fans tried to justify it as cosplay or shock value art, others were disturbed by the decision. Historically, Japan and Germany were allies during World War II, and remnants of that past sometimes show up in the tone-deaf pop culture references, costumes, or promotional material that Western audiences may find offensive. And up next we have Dolphins 1925. In early 2013, a Redditor by the name of Dolphins 1925 began posting on the subreddit Squared Circle, claiming he, or someone he knew, had advanced knowledge of WWE match outcomes. Debuting with absolute accuracy with the February 2013 Elimination Chamber show, he delivered on every prediction, and it didn't stop there. By mid-year, he nailed 38 consecutive match results across multiple events. What made this eerie wasn't just the accuracy, it was the timing. These predictions were posted minutes or even hours before events even started, leaving fans wondering if someone inside WWE was feeding him information or he himself worked for WWE. Rumors quickly spread that Dolphins 1925 was actually Dolph Ziggler, hence Dolphins 1925. WWE itself indirectly acknowledged the leak, quipping that they might have a modern-day Nostradamus on their hands, and hinted that they were monitoring upcoming pay-per-views. Eventually, the post slowed down, and Dolphins 1925 faded into obscurity. But for a brief period, he was the boogeyman of spoilers, a ghost in the machine who knew everything before it happened. To this day, nobody knows who he really was. And up next we have Christian bought a slave in Malaysia. This is one of the strangest and most uncomfortable wrestling urban legends to circulate online, the story that Christian bought a slave in Malaysia. This bizarre theory was originally published by the now infamous wrestling dirt sheet ProWrestling.net, and from there, it took on a disturbing life of its own. According to the report, Christian, while in a WWE-sanctioned tour of Malaysia in 2011, allegedly bought a human being with the intent of bringing them back to the United States. They claimed that he had somehow been caught in the act and chose not to follow through with it at the last minute. The supposed whistleblower was a man named Jose Gonzalez, who claimed to be part of an organization called the Anti-Slavery Union. The details were never corroborated, of course, and many fans believe that the story was entirely fabricated for shock value. To this day, neither Christian or WWE have addressed the rumor, adding another layer of mystery to a story that somehow managed to embed itself in wrestling internet lore. And up next we have man steals $50,000 from WWE. In March of 2012, the Stamford Advocate reported one of the most audacious real-world scandals involving WWE, a man who stole over $50,000 from the company's bank accounts. The accused was a 34-year-old James Dwayne Bass from Tennessee. Between October and November of 2011, he orchestrated 61 unauthorized withdrawals, totaling over $50,000. He used the funds for everyday living expenses, like food and bills. He did it by obtaining WWE's routing and account numbers. He made payments and forged checks through various aliases like Kelly Malik and Timothy Battles. He was eventually extradited to Connecticut, charged with first-degree larceny and multiple counts of forgery, and held on a $50,000 bail. Unfortunately, there is no information online on what happened after this, whether he was convicted, sentenced, or received probation. And up next we have Ken Wayne's CP. Ken Wayne, famously one half of the Nightmares tag team along Danny Davis, was a fixture in wrestling territories during the 70s and 80s. At one point, he even appeared in WWF as enhancement talent before retiring in 2005. However, his legacy took a nightmarish turn in 2014. Investigators with the Mississippi Attorney General's Cybercrime Unit found Wayne in possession of numerous CP files. In February of 2016, he pleaded guilty to his charges and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He then served 5 years in prison, followed by 15 years of post-release supervision. He was also fined, required to pay restitution, and ordered to register as an offender. And up next we have Undertaker is a part of Hell's Angels. One of the more persistent underground rumors in wrestling lore is that Mark Calloway, better known as The Undertaker, was more than just playing a biker on TV. Some believe that his American badass persona wasn't a gimmick at all, but a thinly veiled reflection of his real-life ties to the Hell's Angels motorcycle club. The proof of this is that Undertaker's first tattoo was done in the presence of several Hell's Angels members. Some claim that they were not just observers, but they were comrades and protectors. This incident allegedly planted the seeds for his biker transformation in WWE years later. But it doesn't stop there. Some believe that Taker's legendary backstage influence, his ability to make or break a wrestler's career with a single word, was due not just to his tenure or status in the locker room, but to real-world muscle. That maybe, just maybe, nobody messed with the dead man because they feared more than just being buried on TV or getting fired. And up next we have the Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero secret relationship conspiracy theory. This is one of the most controversial fan theories to ever circulate online. The idea that Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero were secretly in a romantic relationship. While it's a well-known documented fact that Benoit and Eddie were extremely close in real life, some conspiracy theorists believe their bond ran deeper than friendship. Supporters of this theory point to Benoit's intense grief after Eddie's sudden death in 2005. Benoit was reportedly inconsolable for months, often breaking down and continuing to write letters to Eddie in his personal journal until his own death in 2007. To some, this level of mourning was viewed as unusually intense, too emotional, too personal, and they claim that it suggests that the two were lovers who hid their relationship from the public and even their own families. There's no evidence to support this claim, and most regard it as disrespectful speculation, but like many of wrestling's dark conspiracies, it continues to live on in the shadows of internet forums. And up next we have The Rock sued by teenager. In 2011, a lawsuit was being cooked by then 18-year-old Ronald Basham III of Clarksville, Indiana. He claimed that when he was 7, he was injured when The Rock and Triple H fought outside the ring and caused him injury. During their match, the wrestlers fought in the audience and The Rock allegedly pushed a spectator, which caused the spectator to fall on Basham's leg. He claimed that the family had spent over $37,000 in medical bills due to the injury, including a surgery for a dislocated patella that left the boy with a permanent partial disability. According to the lawsuit, WWE had failed to properly stage the match or provide adequate security. There is no information about the outcome of this lawsuit. And up next we have the Intercontinental Championship South America Mandela Effect. Some Mandela effects are simple misrememberings, others believe something more chilling. Physical traces of a world that no longer exists. One of the strangest collective memories out there is about the location of South America. Many people vividly recall it being positioned further west, almost directly under North America, not tilted off to the side as it is now. It sounds unbelievable, but this is a real Mandela effect that many people believe. And then you look at one of wrestling's most iconic titles, the Intercontinental Championship. If you take a closer look, there, etched in gold, South America appears in a position that doesn't match today's maps. It looks different, like it belongs to another version of Earth entirely. For believers, the old Intercontinental title is residual evidence, a physical artifact from a parallel timeline where geography itself was different, a world where South America hadn't shifted to its current place. Skeptics chalk it up to design error, but others feel a deeper chill. And up next we have the Survivor Series 2015 Kaboom threat. WWE's 2015 Survivor Series in Atlanta faced a real-world threat. Reports emerged that Anonymous, the hacker collective, had uncovered plans by a group that rhymes with crisis to target the event at Phillips Arena. Though the FBI confirmed they were investigating, they also stressed that there was no specific or credible information suggesting that an attack was imminent. WWE and local authorities treated the warning with utmost seriousness. Security was fortified and fans were subjected to stricter screenings and earlier entry times. Despite the tense lead-up, the show went on without incident. No attack, no chaos, just the usual wrestling spectacle. And up next we have Ahmed Johnson accuses Steve Austin of racism. In a story that sparked both skepticism and controversy, former WWE superstar Ahmed Johnson once made the bold claim that Steve Austin was behind a racist act committed in the 1990s. According to Johnson, during his time with WWF, his rental car was vandalized and spray painted with racist slurs and symbols. At the time, he had no idea who did it, but years later, while watching the movie The Longest Yard, that featured Stone Cold Steve Austin, Johnson said that he saw Austin casually using the N-word in a scene, and something clicked. He became convinced that Austin was the one who defaced his car all those years ago. Johnson claimed that the vibe, the word choice, and Austin's demeanor in the movie matched the energy of the racist attack he had experienced. The accusation has never been backed by any evidence. In fact, Mark Henry publicly defended Austin, saying Ahmed was full of shit and there was no basis for the claim. Still, the story persists in corners of wrestling fandom, casting a shadow of conspiracy over one of WWE's most beloved legends. And up next we have WWE Taylor a PDF file. In 2005, a man named Raymond Rolls, better known on the independent scene as Rick Michaels, was quietly working as a costume tailor for WWE. His job was designing and fitting gear for some of the top names in the company, but while traveling and working behind the scenes, he was also hiding something truly disturbing. While he was working for WWE, Rolls was arrested and charged with the R-word of a minor in Georgia. Once the news broke, WWE acted quickly and terminated his contract, wanting to distance themselves from the horrifying charges, but the damage was already done. A man trusted with intimate access to the WWE locker room and its talent turned out to be a predator. The case didn't make mainstream headlines, perhaps because WWE wanted it buried, or maybe because it involved a backstage employee rather than a wrestler. Still, this incident stands as one of WWE's most quietly sinister scandals. And up next we have the Jason Sensation incident. Jason Sensation was once seen as a rising comedic talent in WWE, famously making eerily accurate impersonations of legends like Owen Hart, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, and others. This quickly made him a fan favorite, so much so that WWE signed him to a 3-year contract. For a brief period, it looked like Jason was there to stay, but behind the curtain, tension was brewing. Wrestlers began complaining that Jason's gimmick was cheapening theirs. What started as harmless fun was now being seen as mockery. It wasn't long before the laughter backstage stopped, and due to too many complaints, WWE quietly released him. Years passed, then in 2018, everything turned dark. When WWE Raw came to Toronto, Jason posted a now infamous tweet claiming that he was going to sneak a gun into the arena and do the unthinkable to himself and others in the venue. Panic spread and fans were terrified. Police detained him at the venue and no weapon was found. In a later interview, Jason revealed that he had no real intention of doing anything, but that he had been suffering from depression and other mental health struggles. The tweet, he admitted, was a cry for help, a desperate move to get WWE's attention after years of feeling discarded. He said he felt shattered by how suddenly things had ended, especially after signing that long-term deal. And up next we have JBL's shower test. One of the most bizarre backstage hazing stories in WWE history involves JBL and his so-called shower test. According to Edge's own autobiography, when he was new in the company, JBL walked into the shower while he was bathing, and without warning, JBL began soaping up Edge's backside with his bare hands. The twisted logic behind this ritual was to weed out the prima donnas. If a wrestler reacted negatively or showed discomfort, they'd be labeled soft or difficult to work with. But Edge, instead of freaking out, played along and even offered to return the favor, an unsettling interaction that he claimed helped him gain acceptance in the locker room. This wasn't a one-off incident, as JBL was known to pull the stunt on other new talent as part of a disturbing backstage initiation process, and while Edge eventually became a top star, the story remains a chilling reminder of WWE's old-school toxic locker room culture where abuse was disguised as just part of the business. And up next we have Chris Benoit 911 calls. The call came on June 25, 2007. A call that would unravel one of wrestling's darkest tragedies. On the line was Dennis Fagan, a retired NYPD detective and WWE's head of security. The request was simple, a welfare check, but the details, something was wrong.
Hi, I just spoke to one of the other officers there. My name is Dennis Fagan. I'm a retired detective in New York City. I run the security for World Wrestling, and one of our wrestlers that lives down there is missing, and he told me to say we need a welfare check done.
Okay, what's the address?
130 Green Meadow Lane.
All right, Dennis, what's your last name?
Fagan, F-A-G-A-N.
And what's his name?
Chris Benoit. It's spelled Benoit.
Okay, and he's a wrestler?
Yes, what happened, he's a very religious gentleman, and yesterday he was supposed to show up at a pay-per-view and never got on the plane, never showed up. They've tried to reach his wife, Nancy. She doesn't answer. They tried to call his house. It's out of character for him. So at 3 o'clock this morning, there was a message left for one of the other wrestlers, and basically it says, the dogs are in the backyard, the back door is open, goodbye. And that was it.
And now we're going down the iceberg into the deepest tier, Tier 1. With our first entry on Tier 1 being Vince McMahon is a Freemason. Behind the empire that is WWE stands one man, Vince McMahon, a visionary, tyrant, and a legend. And according to some, a man who owed his power to something far more sinister than ambition alone. There is a theory, whispered in the dark corners of wrestling lore, that Vince McMahon was not an entertainment mogul. He was a high-ranking Freemason. But to understand all of this more, we have to delve deeper into what Freemasonry is. Freemasonry is a secretive fraternal organization that traces its origins back centuries, with deep connections to ritualistic ceremonies, numerology, and power structures across the world. Many conspiracy theorists believe that Freemasons hold influence over politics, information, entertainment, and global events, pulling strings behind the scenes. WWE, under his command, wasn't just a wrestling company, it was a tool, a vessel for larger agendas. This theory finds its roots in several chilling details. The rise of WWE into a cultural monopoly mirrors the Masonic ideal of domination through influence. It's alleged that inside the Titan Towers, WWE's corporate headquarters, there is rumored to be a Masonic lodge, a chamber reserved for private rituals, initiations, and Masonic ceremonies. It is said that this room exists outside of public tours, hidden away behind innocuous doors, waiting for the right moment and the right people. This theory gained even more traction after Vince McMahon's sudden and dramatic retirement in July of 2022, a move that many saw not as a personal decision, but as a humiliation ritual, a standard method used within secret societies to signal the transition of power. The ritualistic elements were hard to ignore. The numerology tied to his retirement also fit into this theory. Dates, announcement times, and gematria connections pointed towards the numbers 33, 47, 74, and even 666, all heavily significant in occult and Freemasonic traditions. To the untrained eye, Vince's fall looked like karma, or the natural ending of a long, controversial career. To others, it looked like a planned ritual, marking the closing of one era and the opening of another. And up next, we have Lex Luger killed Miss Elizabeth. Miss Elizabeth is without a single doubt wrestling's most famous valet. Sure, others came along who were more lewd or shocking, but Elizabeth didn't need that. Her gimmick was the shy, quiet girl next door, timid but loyal, who stood by her man and even got physically involved from time to time. Her most well-known relationship was with the Macho Man Randy Savage, but not many people know that towards the end of her life, she was actually dating Lex Luger, and these two clearly weren't meant for each other. Their relationship was built on pills, alcohol, and constant fighting. Luger was even arrested for assaulting Elizabeth while they were both high, leaving her with 2 black eyes, a busted lip, and a bump on her head. He was later released on bail. But less than 2 weeks after that incident, Miss Elizabeth overdosed in the presence of Lex Luger and died. Fans found this suspicious, and over the years, some have come up with the conspiracy theory that something more sinister was at play, that Luger may have actually been responsible for Elizabeth's death. And up next, we have Chris Benoit, MK Ultra. One of the most bizarre and out there theories about the Benoit case suggests that Chris Benoit was not acting of his free will when he committed the horrific murders of his wife Nancy and his son Daniel. Instead, according to this theory, he was a mind control sleeper agent, a product of MK Ultra programming. Now, for those unfamiliar, MK Ultra was a real-life, top-secret CIA mind control program that ran from the 1950s to the 1970s. The goal of MK Ultra was to experiment with ways to control the human mind through hypnosis, LSD, sensory deprivation, psychological torture, and other disturbing methods. Declassified government documents confirm that the CIA attempted to break people psychologically to turn them into obedient, programmable assets, essentially human weapons that could carry out orders without remembering them. The program was supposedly shut down in the 1970s, but conspiracy theorists argue that it never truly ended, and it just went underground. At first glance, it sounds like something straight out of a movie, but those who push the MK Ultra Benoit theory point to several eerie connections. One of them is Benoit's bizarre behavior leading up to the murders, as he displayed paranoia and erratic mood swings. Some people believe that this was evidence of programming, and also Benoit felt like he was being followed, and according to this theory, Benoit was actually being followed by supposedly a handler of sorts. Another eerie connection is the methodical nature of the crime. Some believe that this was far too clean for a man in emotional breakdown. The crime scene seemed chillingly calculated. Did Benoit do this out of rage, or was it something more mechanical? Another eerie connection is the prevalence of MK Ultra celebrities within the entertainment industry, including Hollywood, music, and even pro wrestling. The idea is that some celebrities and athletes are broken individuals and have a large following, so they can be easily programmed and used for hidden agendas. This theory does not claim that Benoit was innocent. It suggests that he did commit the murders, but not of his own free will. If that's the case, the biggest question remains, who would want Chris to carry out this horrific act? Some believe it was a test of psychological control, others think he knew far too much about something bigger, and some suggest that he was simply chosen as a subject for reasons unknown. And up next we have Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty allegations. In a shoot interview with Brutus the Barber Beefcake, he revealed something truly disturbing about Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. Brutus Beefcake claimed that Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty would regularly spike girls' drinks, take them back to the hotel room, and then while the girls were passed out, they would have their way with them, and then afterwards they would toss them into the hallway, sometimes even naked. These allegations are truly heinous, and Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty have since denied these allegations. However, if true, this shows just how out of control Shawn Michaels' life was, and it would mean that fans have been propping up a serial abuser in Shawn Michaels for years. And up next we have SmackDown vs. Raw 2006 foreshadowing of Eddie Guerrero's death. In SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, one of the earlier storylines in season mode features The Undertaker and Eddie Guerrero. At the climax of the storyline, if you win the casket match, a cutscene plays showing The Undertaker chokeslamming Guerrero into a casket. Tragically, just 2 days after the game's European release, Eddie Guerrero was found dead in his hotel room at just 38 years old. His death occurred just 1 day before the game's release in the United States. Many fans found the timing of the storyline and cutscene to be deeply unsettling and disturbingly prophetic. And up next we have John Cena actually sold his soul. In early 2024, John Cena made headlines when he appeared naked on stage at the Academy Awards, using nothing but a giant envelope to cover himself while presenting an award. It was part of a comedic bit, meant to promote his new film, Ricky Stanicky, an R-rated comedy where Cena plays a bizarre, over-the-top character, but not everybody saw it as a joke. Some believe that it wasn't just a publicity stunt, but something far much darker, a humiliation ritual. In conspiracy circles, public acts of embarrassment, especially by powerful celebrities, are sometimes seen as initiations into elite circles, not just for fame, but for access. This theory suggests that the Oscar stunt was a public display to signify his loyalty to the hidden forces behind Hollywood. And the eeriest part, in WWE's current storyline, John Cena is a heel after selling his soul to The Rock. To some, that's just storytelling. To others, it's a reflection of reality, a subtle confession disguised as fiction. And up next we have The Undertaker is a secret Nazi. This entry stems from a photo where The Undertaker is seen wearing a shirt with iconography that strongly resembles the Nazi SS symbol, specifically 2 lightning bolt-like S shapes, nearly identical to the emblem used by the SS. It's important to note that this kind of imagery was disturbingly popular in certain biker subcultures, especially during the 70s and 80s. Many bikers wore Nazi-inspired patches, not out of political allegiance, but because they saw it as rebellious, edgy, and deliberately offensive. That said, racism was undeniably present in some of those circles, and for many, the shock value was part of the appeal. Still, some fans believe that this isn't just about shock. They argue it's proof that The Undertaker is a genuine sympathizer for Nazi ideology, and that his American badass persona wasn't just a gimmick, but a reflection of something darker beneath the surface. And up next we have The Clique is Illuminati. In the mid-90s, a group of 5 men quietly took over the wrestling world. Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Sean Weltman, together known as The Clique. Their mission was simple: rise to the top of the wrestling industry at all costs. And they did. Triple H and Shawn Michaels became untouchable in WWE. Meanwhile, Hall and Nash were running the scene in WCW, but this conspiracy suggests that the success wasn't just about politics or talent, it was something much darker. According to this theory, the clique sold their souls to the devil to achieve power, fame, and total control. The evidence, it's symbolic, but unsettling. NWO's iconic Too Sweet hand gesture is said to resemble devil horns, a quiet nod to the forces they're allegedly aligned with. And the faction names were even more suspicious. The New World Order shares its name with a notorious conspiracy theory about a hidden elite working to establish global totalitarian control, and Degeneration X, a name that in its theory symbolizes cultural decay, a movement meant to glamorize rebellion, degeneration, and spiritual disconnection, all tools to weaken the masses, especially the youth. Together, these factions served a purpose: to normalize chaos, promote moral decay, and clear the way for control by a higher, darker power. Some say it was just branding, while others believe it was intentional programming, crafted by a group who knew exactly what they were doing. And when you look at the influence they had, the power they wielded, the doors that opened, it makes you wonder, how much did they really give up to get to the top? And up next we have Buck Zumhofe PDF file. Rock and Roll Buck Zumhofe was a staple in 1980s AWA, and he was the second ever AWA light heavyweight champion. In 1986, he was arrested and found guilty of misconduct with a minor. After he was a confirmed predator, he went back to wrestle for the AWA. His predatory behavior didn't stop there though, as in 1989, he was sentenced to 36 months in prison after being convicted of 4th-degree misconduct with a minor. He spent his time in prison and was ultimately released and went back to wrestling like nothing had happened, even after the fact that he was a 2-time convicted offender. WWE hired him on several different occasions, having him even wrestle against The Undertaker one time. All of this is just scratching the surface though, because his story gets even worse as he was arrested again in 2013 when he was charged with 12 felony counts of criminal misconduct after he SA'd his very own daughter for 12 years between 1999 and 2011. He was convicted on all 12 counts, and after the verdict, he tried to flee from the courthouse, but officers stopped him and he was additionally charged with trying to escape from custody. He was officially sentenced to 25 years in prison. And up next we have the Ultimate Warrior sacrificed. The death of the Ultimate Warrior in 2014 shocked the wrestling world, but some believe it wasn't just a tragic coincidence. They believe it was a ritual sacrifice, hidden in plain sight. The timeline is unsettling. On April 5th, the Warrior appeared at the WWE Hall of Fame ceremony. The next day, on April 6th, he appeared at WrestleMania 30. The next day, on April 7, he delivered a haunting speech on Monday Night Raw, speaking about spirit, legacy, and death. On April 8, just one day after telling fans that no one truly dies, he collapsed and died. Theorists point to those 3 appearances on the Hall of Fame, WrestleMania, and Raw as a symbol of ancient death and resurrection cycles, much like the sun dying during eclipses or winter solstices. They call it the ultimate eclipse sacrifice. In occult traditions, solar eclipses often symbolize death, cosmic resets, and transitions of power. Through the lens of Masonic numerology and gematria, eerie patterns appear. The word sun shares numeric connections to the warrior's age of death, which is 54. Warrior's final speech, where he also foreshadowed his own demise, fits the pattern of predictive programming often associated with occult ritual theories. Official reports listed his cause of death as natural heart failure. No signs of foul play were ever found, but the timing, the symbolism, the message, it leaves a heavy question lingering. Was the Ultimate Warrior's final battle already written by forces far beyond the squared circle? And up next we have Grizzly Smith PDF file. Grizzly Smith was an American professional wrestler who had an over 20-year career in the wrestling industry and held various backstage positions in promotions such as Mid-South Wrestling, the WWE, and WCW. He was the father of professional wrestlers Jake the Snake Roberts, Rocking Robin, and Sam Houston. His most famous child, Jake the Snake Roberts, was conceived in a very disturbing way. While Grizzly Smith was dating Jake the Snake's grandmother, Grizzly R-worded the woman's 12-year-old daughter, who became pregnant with Jake Roberts. Grizzly then convinced Jake's grandmother to allow him to marry her 12-year-old daughter, and so he forced the 12-year-old girl, Jake's mom, to marry him. Jake the Snake's childhood was filled with trauma and abuse, as he constantly suffered SA from his stepmother. Grizzly knew all about it but did nothing to stop it, sometimes even allegedly encouraging it. Roberts also claimed that Grizzly would travel around the country and often sleep with underage girls. Grizzly Smith was a serial PDF file because he even began to SA his own children. One of his daughters, Rockin' Robin, disclosed that she suffered SA by her father from the age of 8 to 14 years old, and she threatened to shoot him with his own gun in order to make him stop. Rockin' Robin believes that her other sister, Jolynn, was also assaulted by Grizzly Smith. The aftermath of these harrowing events resulted in a downward spiral into substance abuse for all of Grizzly's children. Jake's well-documented descent into drug addiction serves as a poignant testament to the profound impact of childhood trauma. And up next we have Vince McMahon sacrificed Owen Hart. A growing theory claims that Owen Hart's death was not an accident. It was a ritualistic sacrifice, orchestrated by one man, Vince McMahon. But when you look closer, the signs around Owen's death become harder to ignore. According to conspiracy theorists, Vince McMahon held a deep grudge against the Hart family, and this was primarily for two reasons. Owen's brother, Bret Hart, humiliated Vince McMahon during the infamous Montreal Screwjob, and the other reason is that Owen himself had accidentally broken Stone Cold Steve Austin's neck, almost crippling Vince McMahon's biggest star during the peak of the Monday Night Wars with WCW. For Vince, some believe, the Hart family had become a problem that had to be buried. They point to Vince burying Owen with the humiliating Blue Blazer gimmick, relegating a world-class wrestler to a cartoonish mid-card joke, setting the stage for the ultimate humiliation. And then came the day that he died, May 23, 1999. But the coincidence doesn't end there. Exactly 1 year to the day before Owen Hart's death, on May 23, 1998, an episode of Batman, the animated series, aired an episode called Over the Edge. And that same name of that episode of Batman was the same name as the pay-per-view where Owen died at, Over the Edge. But the eeriness doesn't end there. In that episode, Batgirl falls from a rooftop to her death, leading to grief, revenge, and chaos. To some, this isn't just a coincidence. It is seen as satanic foreshadowing, a symbolic prophecy used in ritualistic sacrifice to bind the act with dark forces. And the timing of WWE's success only adds more fuel to the fire. Just 4 months after Owen Hart's death, WWE went public, launching on the stock market, securing millions, and ushering in an era of corporate dominance Vince had long dreamed of. Some say that Owen Hart was sacrificed in order for WWE to be successful on the stock market. Publicly, it was mourned as a tragedy, but many people also claim that it was a deeply carefully timed ritual, a sacrifice hidden in plain sight. And up next we have Mr. Fuji feeds dog to wrestlers. Mr. Fuji, known for his evil persona, reportedly didn't limit his antics to the ring. He took backstage pranks to a new disturbing extreme. According to multiple accounts from the Bushwhackers and more, Fuji once hosted a barbecue where he shockingly took the life of a neighbor's pet, a dog, and cooked it for the unsuspecting roster, even sprinkling laxatives into the food to trigger violent diarrhea later. Hulk Hogan confirmed the story on Eric Bischoff's podcast, describing it as the legendary rib of all ribs. Fuji didn't stop there though. He would also shit in people's bags, glue their clothes to ceilings, sabotage cars, spike the boys, and much more. His sadistic streak was as legendary as it was vicious, but this was the time he took it too far. And up next we have the DT Porter murder. DT Porter, real name Brian McGee, was known by his ring name DT Porter. He worked on the independents before signing a WWE developmental contract in 2010. Standing in at 6'7" with an athletic build, he was seen as a potential main roster star. Porter even appeared in 2 WWE house shows, but was ultimately released in 2012 before ever getting called up. And this crushed him. After his release, he reportedly spiraled into alcoholism and his life quickly went off the rails. In the summer of 2013, witnesses saw him exit his car at his girlfriend's apartment complex and murder his girlfriend with a knife in broad daylight before fleeing the scene. In a horrifying act, Porter then posted a photo of what he had done to his girlfriend as his Facebook profile picture. A high-speed chase followed, ending with Porter crashing his car and being apprehended. He was later charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. And up next we have the McMahon family or actors. One of the most bizarre yet strangely captivating conspiracy theories in the wrestling world is that the McMahon family isn't real. Not in the sense that they don't exist, but they're not who they say they are. According to believers of this conspiracy theory, Vince McMahon, his wife Linda, and their children Shane and Stephanie are all actors, hired to portray the characters of a powerful wrestling dynasty. In this version of reality, The entire McMahon family saga, the corporate battles, the scandals, the bizarre storylines, was all part of a larger orchestrated performance. This theory hinges on the idea that WWE itself is a shell organization, owned and operated by hidden elites who stay far away from the spotlight. The McMahons then are paid performers tasked with maintaining the illusion of control, playing out a decades-long theater act in front of the world. Some theorists even argue that this deception extends beyond wrestling, pointing to Linda McMahon's real-life political career and ties to the Trump administration as evidence that the kayfabe stretches into actual politics and business. Vince McMahon in particular is seen as a red flag. His over-the-top persona, villainous energy, and uncanny knack for playing the role of the tyrannical boss has led some to believe that no one could be that perfect for the part unless they were cast for it. Even Shane and Stephanie aren't spared. Shane's rebel son character, who fights against Vince McMahon, and Stephanie's transformation into the polished corporate queen are said to be too scripted, too on brand, too perfect to be organic. There are even whispers online that the real McMahons may have vanished or died decades ago, and that successive actors have played their roles ever since. Kind of like the Paul McCartney clone theory, but with steel chairs and pay-per-views. Supporters of this theory point to inconsistencies in public records, the controlled nature of WWE media, and the way WWE has always been a universe where fiction is paraded as truth. If wrestling is fake, they argue, why not the owners? There's zero hard evidence for this theory, of course, but in an age where truth is stranger than fiction and kayfabe never truly dies, even the wildest theories tend to stick. Because if Vince McMahon was just playing a role, then what else is fake? And up next we have Steve Gatorwolf PDF file. Steve Gatorwolf was a professional wrestler best known for his brief time in WWE during the late 80s. According to Bret Hart, Gatorwolf was seen as a promising talent, but he blew his one big opportunity by forgetting to perform a war dance spot that was meant to get his Native American character over with the crowd. After that, he never got a second chance and was released from the company. Things took a much darker turn in his personal life though, as in 2001, Gatorwolf was sentenced to 2 years in prison for aggravated battery, and more than a decade later, in 2014, he was arrested again at the age of 56. This time, he was charged with 7 felony counts of the R-word of a 15-year-old girl, the daughter of his friend. According to reports, the assaults dated back to when she was just 14. Court documents revealed that Gatorwolf told the victim he would himself if she ever told anyone, because he didn't want to go back to prison. The girl in question eventually came forward, and during the trial, the court played threatening voicemails Gatorwolf had left on her phone. Disturbingly, despite the seriousness of the charges, Gatorwolf chose to present himself in court, cutting promos in the third person as if he was still a wrestler. He acted like he was The Rock, delivering lines instead of legal arguments. Unsurprisingly, the jury didn't buy it. Gatorwolf was found guilty and sentenced to 16 years in prison. And up next we have the Eddie Guerrero is still alive conspiracy theory. Eddie Guerrero's death in 2005 shook the wrestling world to its core. At just 38 years old, one of the most beloved performers of all time was found lifeless in his hotel room, a tragedy that left fans, friends, and family reeling. The tributes poured in, but some conspiracy theorists claim that Eddie Guerrero did not actually die. According to a growing cult of believers, the theory goes that his death was staged, a carefully manufactured hoax orchestrated by Vince McMahon himself, allegedly as part of an ultra-controversial long-term storyline that never came to pass. The story hinges on an eerie pattern. Eddie's posthumous presence never truly left WWE. In fact, after his death, it intensified. Within weeks of Eddie's death, he was being referenced constantly in live promos and feuds. His face kept appearing on screens, and his name echoed through arenas. To believers, this wasn't a tribute, it was a foreshadowing, a breadcrumb trail. Then there's the title of his 2005 autobiography and DVD, called Cheating Death, Stealing Life. Many fans took this as an intentional clue. Was Eddie Guerrero, the ultimate trickster, pulling the biggest lie of them all? Lying to the fans, cheating death, and stealing everyone's emotions. Some claim that Vince McMahon had planned for Eddie to eventually return as part of a shocking resurrection storyline, one that would change wrestling forever. But conspiracy theorists believe, because the backlash of Eddie's passing was stronger than expected, and the grief far too real, the plan was quietly buried, along with the truth. To this day, there's allegedly sightings of Eddie Guerrero all over Latin America, fans posting blurry photos of men who bear uncanny resemblance to him. Of course, there's no solid proof. Only speculation, coincidences, and lingering questions. But one thing's for certain, Eddie Guerrero's presence has never fully vanished from WWE. whether it's in Rey Mysterio's tributes, Dominic's storyline lineage, or the constant echoes of Lie, Cheat, Steal, Eddie is always there with us. And now at the bottom of the iceberg, with our last entry being Vince McMahon sacrificed Chris Benoit. The theory goes that Chris Benoit was not just a troubled wrestler who snapped, he was a chosen sacrifice. Vince McMahon, as a high-ranking Freemason, orchestrated his death by sending a professional hit on Chris Benoit and his family as an offering to the Dark Forces, ensuring the future success for WWE as a transition into its PG era. Because as soon as Benoit died, WWE ditched the blood and guts product that they were known for and adopted a more family-friendly PG product. Some believe that this was no coincidence. Nancy and Daniel were found with a Bible placed next to them, a seemingly religious gesture, but some believe that this has deeper meaning. Conspiracy theorists argue that placing the Bibles next to each body was not a sign of remorse, but a symbolic offering. Another piece of evidence is Benoit's name and Freemasonry numerology. The name Christopher Benoit has numerological values that match key Masonic numbers. The number 290 appears multiple times in Benoit's life and death, and it matches significant Freemason events. Benoit died exactly 290 years after the founding of the Premier Grand Lodge of England, the very birth of modern Freemasonry. Another piece of evidence is the eclipse sacrifice theory. This theory suggests that Benoit was not just murdered, he was ritually sacrificed during a significant astrological period. Benoit's death happened 64 weeks and 4 days after a major solar eclipse, a timing that conspiracy theorists claim aligns with other occult sacrifices in history. Eclipses are often linked to major Masonic rituals, representing rebirth through destruction. And then there's the connection to Eddie Guerrero's death. Eddie Guerrero died exactly 84 weeks before Benoit, a number that holds deep occult meaning. Is this just a coincidence, or was Benoit chosen as an offering, his life taken to ensure McMahon's empire would continue to thrive? Of course, there is no hard evidence that McMahon was ever involved, but for those who believe in the darker forces behind the wrestling industry, Benoit's death wasn't just another tragedy. It was a ritual, a sacrifice, a debt paid in blood. Thank you for watching part 2 of this video. If you enjoyed this video, you should definitely click on the part 1 video that's on your screen now. Thank you again, and goodbye.